Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is Feb 15, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. It's an honor and a pleasure today to be here with Nora M. Alter. Is that how you pronounce it, Alter?
Yeah.
And where are you calling from, Nora?
Philadelphia.
First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Is the best thing for a human being to have integrity.
Oh, I like that. I rarely get that answer. Very cool. So what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Probably reading,
Yeah.
like
Did
reading
you
on paper.
yeah,
Print,
did you
old
did you
fashioned.
be did you yeah. No, that will last forever. Mallarmé says everything will end up in a book. That's not
Yeah.
old fashioned. That's the future. But did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
Definitely the influence and impact of my parents. They were both of them were very influenced by literature. Were literature professors, and my father heavily curated my reading throughout my life till I went to college.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oh, that is an interesting question. I would say probably to be able to communicate with each other, as well as in some instances to make both their life and the life of others better,
Yeah,
to improve it.
I
And
love it.
by gathering data and information, one seeks to overcome certain obstacles.
Yep. Having interviewed people for 40 years, I mean, it boils down. We're here to make the world a better place. I mean, duh. That's
Yeah.
like to improve. We can make it better. So, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Well, I think that more innate. You mean it's
More hardwired in us, in our DNA, or did we invent it?
I think the two are interrelated.
Yeah.
I mean, humans are sort of the only information collectors that we know about. I mean, it's an interesting question because when I'm thinking about certain mammals that have, say, more highly developed brains than others, so let's say whales or dolphins, elephants, certain primates, I don't know if they collect information. We don't know that. They might. It's hard to say. They definitely have memory. So if memory is a form of collecting information, then yes, it would
Love
be.
it. Love it. I really appreciate it because everybody goes, nah, I mean, most people want to say that they're collecting information, but we don't have the words that dolphins have. We don't
Right.
have the language, but we want to anthropomorphize. So you
Right.
didn't do that there, and I really appreciate that. Do thoughts create emotions?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
Assess the situation from all perspectives.
Yeah, that's interesting. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Okay.
But you're saying assess, meaning get a bigger picture. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Can
So I
humans?
try to listen to different perspectives,
Yeah,
read different
yeah,
perspectives, but sometimes, ideas do come together in the writing process.
yeah.
And when I'm deep into the writing process, they sometimes come together in the dreaming process.
There you go. Wow. All right. So can humans think without language?
Can humans think without language? Language being verbal, linguistic language, not in a language of expressions. That is a really difficult question. And I actually remember when I was probably, oh, I don't know, about 10 years old in a car ride in the back seat with my parents, and they had a couple other people with them in the car. You know, people used to pack a lot of people in cars those days. And I remember they were having a huge debate about that, whether or not humans could think without language. And I remember it being a divided debate. Some people said, no, you need language to produce thought. And others said, no, of course, you can think with emotions. So I'm not quite sure what the answer to that would be.
I appreciate you being honest. Just because like Rebecca Solnit says, just because you ask me a question doesn't mean I have to answer it. And saying I don't know or I can't answer that is totally fine. But I'm really curious. You got good memory. Did you pipe in during that discussion at all?
I don't think so. I think I was just drowned out.
They should have let you pipe in because you probably would have nailed the answer. Okay. Chomsky says language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Nora, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, I think that's probably one of the most frustrating aspects in my life, when you feel that you can no longer communicate with somebody.
Yeah.
Or with an entity, for example, or with a community.
Yeah.
And that you're hitting a wall. And I think, you know, that for many of us is extremely frustrating, and it produces a wide range of responses.
But what do you do? I mean, basically, what's your, any strategies or?
I usually try to keep approaching whatever it is I'm trying to communicate from different angles.
Yeah.
You know, so I keep trying and trying, and in the hopes that somehow a breakthrough will occur.
Beautiful. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I would say, unfortunately, we are more, the majority of might be more feeling beings, but I wish we were more thinking beings.
Yeah. Amazing. Here, most people answer, I think we're more feeling beings. I mean, 80% say that, which is in Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? Or like people who meditate go, now think about not thinking. Yeah, well, there's a bumper sticker on a car on my street. It says, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Right. Yeah.
So because we invented these words, feeling and thinking, we think we can separate them. They're probably, you know, back to that, you know, both. But, you know, I like you saying it. Maybe we should be more thinking beings because we're going around making. Yeah. So here's two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Thinking a function of the soul. I mean, I would throw back to you, what is soul?
Yeah. Well,
because that posits means it's already implying that one believes in something called a soul.
Yeah. Well, you win because this series is all about inventing questions. So you answered a question with a question. But most people say that. But me and you kind of have a hunch what people kind of think the soul is. Right. You know. So do you think it's a function of the soul? Just your hunch or your guess?
Not really. I think thinking and thought is a product of the environment, of your social environment, of people who surround you, your community, what you've been taught.
Yeah. Social environment. Wow, that's heavy. Okay, so the second question from Turing is, can machines think?
Okay, so this is connected to the soul question. If we think that machines have a soul, then they can think. Machines can I mean, this is a whole definition of what is thinking. If
Yeah.
thinking is merely acquiring data, knowledge, synthesizing it, coming up with conclusions, then yes, of course they can think. And they're learning every day. If thinking is something creative, inventive, and is operating on sort of the borders, the margins, or the glitches, then no, it can't think.
Yeah. Love it. Love the word glitches. You are articulate and concise. I appreciate it. And I don't ask this often, but I want to hear. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
I think it's more inventive and creative, actual thinking.
We did we invent
Oh,
thinking?
did we invent thinking?
Or is it in us innately to think?
I think it's in us innately. I think
Yeah.
we're hardwired. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you look at small babies and you can see them already starting to try to figure things out.
Yeah. Really good. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Probably meaning.
Yeah. I got it from Viktor
Maybe
Frankl.
I'd be happier if I pursued happiness more.
Hey, you're laughing right now. That's the other thing. This series is all about trying to have fun, so I'm glad you're laughing. Because Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning, his book, that happiness doesn't tend to last and meaning does.
Right. Well, that's good. I have to note that down. That's a good one.
Yeah. Because, I mean, so in the word, I'm for us psychoanalyzing the verbs and nouns I use in these questions. You can go, well, I would ask it this because pursue, some people go, what do you mean pursue?
Right.
Do you pursue happiness? Meaning just happens when the things happen, but maybe you're pursuing it. I don't know. This one is different. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think consciousness is bubbling away and we detect it. And that's why there's so much that we don't actually detect that comes out in the unconscious.
Yeah. That's the neuroscientists or, Lakoff saying we operate 95 or 80% subconsciously, right? I can't, I think me and you are here consciously about 95%. So how could the subconscious and unconscious be operating? Well, I think it's interesting to think that. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Depends on which people. No. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. I get that answer. But I mean, people, just even people aside, speed of light or speed of thought. Like if it was just generic, everybody,
Probably speed of light.
Yeah. Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
I didn't know Yvonne said that. I actually know Yvonne. She's like,
yeah. Give her a plug. I'd love to.
I've
asked that question for 40 years. I'd love to interview her. She is amazing.
She's absolutely
amazing. And it's such a contrary because a lot of people hear the Audre Lorde as a cliche. Almost. And it's like, what do you mean? Why do I want to dismantle the master's house? That's what they say sometimes. Because it's fucking supremacist and racist and fascist. But, how do you do that? And then Yvonne saying, oh, no, just expose their tools. But just to tell you up front, you put the questions in the context you want. And sometimes I ask them with these cute quotes before. Basically, what I'm asking is, what tool do you most gravitate towards? You can apply the word new if you want, and you can apply the master's house thoughts if you want.
What tool do I use what tools do I think are effective? I mean, I am not right now I don't since I'm not a maker or an artist, it's hard to say what tools I think are effective. I mean, I can say what artists work that I like, that I think are doing interesting work. I think it's often um, using, so for example, there's an artist whose name is Hito Steyrl, and she's a German artist, and she will use.
Another one I've tried to interview for years. So hook me up.
Okay.
She's amazing. Do you know
She's,
her too?
yeah. So
Yeah.
she's amazing, but she actually she will use AI and CGI to try to make her critique. So she actually uses the medium to critique whatever it is that she's critiquing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what one would call those tools, but it is almost using the actual substance, the material of the master's house to pull it apart.
Yeah. But you do use tools, and tool doesn't have to mean physical.
Right. I mean, I write and I think. Thinking, teaching.
Teaching and writing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
although we can get in trouble these days saying teaching.
What? You had trouble saying anything. But it's amazing because Hito is and I mean, in essence, what you described is sort of what all, I mean, especially in the experimental film world, or all great art, is they're kind of pulling back the curtain and exposing the process. And that it's the form and the content where you can't, well, what, is this for real?
Yeah.
What new toy do you suggest?
Toy.
Yeah.
Toy for children?
Yeah, no, toy just means, see, I asked people what tool for years, and someone said, well, what about a toy? So I says, hey, that's a good add-on question. Just a toy in general, whether it's for a child or, back to artists, that's what they're doing, is being playful if they're great art, basically, or there is some playfulness involved. So again, a toy implies like, a slinky or something, but it also it could imply something else.
I'm gonna have to think on that one and come back to you with that.
No worries.
I had not thought about toys. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good question, though.
No worries. So Nora, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
And we say, what don't I worry about when I go to bed at night? Well, these days there's quite a bit to worry about, Jerry.
Yeah.
We are dealing with an insomniac who rules the Western world right now. Yeah. So you never know what headlines you're going to wake up to. So I think I have a lot of worries that many people share about the direction that things are going in. Everything from nuclear proliferation to economic collapse to new diseases, just a little, to climate disaster, environmental disaster, just the little ones. Nothing too major.
Again, we're not going to survive unless we have a sense of humor.
No, I know, it's yeah.
But this is connected with what you said about Hito. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So Nora, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, I think that because often the inventions are connected to capital, to commodities, to the economic system. So people would rather ignore the perhaps troubling side or dark side and focus more on the profit margin side.
So well put. That's like someone told me all the great revolutionaries, Che or Castro, they were all, or I don't know, the black MLK and Malcolm X. They all were rich kids who went to the working class, go, you're getting screwed. And the working class said, well, thanks for telling us, but we're too busy trying to make a living, you know. And then they would try to say, come on, we got to do something and change that, because commodity is a great word you brought up. That's really good. So do artists have moral obligation?
Do they have moral obligation? I mean, it depends. Some artists are just in it for the market to make money. I mean, there are different types of artists. I think the artists that you and I are both interested in are not those types of artists. And I think that the other thing that what an artist can do is, it falls into the old cliche of artistic license, but they can put work out there, and then because it's within the frame of a gallery or an exhibition or a museum, they can get certain works very, very quickly into the public eye. And unlike, let's say, a documentary filmmaker who might be exploring a similar topic, they don't have to dot every single I. It doesn't have to take 10 years of research. They can just, on a suggestion, put it out there and just say, okay, here is what I have discovered about surveillance systems, for example. Now I'll leave it up to other people to actually do the research, do the footnotes, do the verifications, but this is my work. Something about, for example, someone like Laura Poitras, right, who goes from the documentary world and then she goes into the art world. Because it allows for almost a more contemporary, immediate response.
Amazing. Wait a minute. Laura is in the art world now?
Yeah, she's been exhibiting in the art world for about 8 years. And then,
oh my God. So
when she did this really important project that came out with Forensic Architecture, that group that is based in both London and this was at the Neue Berlin Kunstverein in Berlin in June of 2021. And they were basically breaking the cover of the whole Pegasus spyware.
Yeah.
And they did it, 2 months then before the New York Times and other major, newspaper
they broke it. And then they get reviewed. It's like how MK Ultra will not be talked about in normal newspapers, but if you do a play on it or a fiction film book, they'll review it and then they'll start talking about it. But you really evoked it, because Laura won that Oscar, and well deserved, amazing. And hopefully Jonah's film soundtrack to the coup d'etat.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, that's great. That's really great.
My God. But you talk about what you just said. You don't have to dot every I. He tells you this was written by Maya Angelou. It's in this paper, and here's the page number on the screen. And he says, I had to do that because they were going to come after my ass and say, what's your source? It goes, it's on the screen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's such important work, his work.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. But it is sort of back to, everything you said was really important. That's what most of my questions are, just props. You don't have to answer the question, but it's more like Louis Buñuel or Pasolini or these guys who do these things. Like, Louis is my favorite filmmaker, but he has street punks beating up a blind wino. And it's like, does he have a moral obligation? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know if you can add anything more, because, some people might get that wrong,
Right. I mean, I think you have to treat, certainly beating up a wino or what, I mean, there are a lot of cases going back then of the whole ethical treatment of subjects are being photographed or filmed or become the subject of exposés and think, we look back and we're just like, oh my gosh, you can't do that now. And I mean, I think that there are now, there's just an awareness and a responsibility as a filmmaker, a documentarian, an artist with the subject, particularly, how do you treat the subject?
But is that our awareness has risen because of the environment change? Because I don't want to go too deep into this, but I showed Last Tango in Paris in the 70s at Ann Arbor, Michigan, University, Michigan. And we could show it anytime we have a full house. And, it's a great film. But man, when Maria came out years later, I'm sure you know about this.
Oh yeah, my colleague actually made a film that won quite a few awards about Maria.
Who did?
A colleague of mine, Elizabeth Subrin.
Oh, I know her.
So she has a experimental piece on Maria Schneider.
And that's a short or a feature?
It's a short, and I think she has 3 different actors playing.
Yeah.
Like restaging one of the last interviews with Maria Schneider.
Yeah. No, and it's intense. And in the long run, once I learned that, I felt guilty. I was like, because it didn't settle in my past. Like, what did I do? How wasn't I not aware of? Well, you couldn't really be aware of it then, because her acting in them. I did watch the film recently, and it doesn't feel like she's. So I mean, then it goes into actors and actresses in violent porn films. Right. So anyways, that's Elizabeth's another one. I don't think I've interviewed her, but I should. I'm going to give you a list of people you can maybe hook me up, because some of these people need a little nudging. I thank you for saying yes. But, I have interviewed a lot of the greats, like, them as Nita Menkins and Chick Strand and, what's her name? Lynn Sachs is one of my favorites. Okay.
Lynn's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
That depends on the ideas.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm not afraid of, in any case, of either ideas. I mean, sometimes there are a lot of old ideas that are pretty dangerous that can be recirculated as if they are new ideas. And that's pretty frightening. And that's certainly happening right now. And then there's some new ideas that are absolutely progressive, or people are picking up old ideas and making them new, which is fresh, like refreshing them and re-employing them. And that's also great.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
I remember, I have a bunch of early memories, but I remember one. We shared a house with a beach house with a couple, another couple who had a boy who was about maybe a year older than me. And I remember we were playing with his trucks under the porch, and I think he hit me with his truck.
Whoa.
His red truck.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I think it depends what memories.
Yeah.
And I think it also, not only does it depend on the memory, but it depends where you are in life. I think that for people who are losing their memory, they would say that memory is a blessing.
Yeah.
But for people who are plagued by traumatic memories or trauma, it's not a blessing.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
I'd say my father.
What did you mainly get from him?
never to prejudge a person or a situation. Always to be willing to reassess one's thoughts and opinions when new information is provided. Not to get sort of frozen or fixed in, locked into certain ideological subject positions.
Beautiful. Same question. Outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was it?
I would say there are people that I have met who I can see that they've conducted themselves in very modest ways with a lot of integrity, where they don't seek the spotlight. They just do their work, put out very important, what I would call important, critical, thoughtful work, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No.
Do you pray?
No.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I can't answer that.
Very good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't think evil is an entity, just like I don't think that God is an entity. So I wouldn't say that evil can use people. Do evil people exist? Sure.
Yeah. Well, this is follow-up. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I think that it's more complicated than that. I think one can acknowledge, I mean, it depends if you mean acknowledge them publicly, like through, socially, publicly, or one which gives them publicity. In that case, I think, yes, that gives people air and oxygen to keep growing, expanding. It empowers them. But one can also sort of indicate that one is aware that they are there and that one is watching vigilantly, but one isn't, so one is always aware of where the enemy is. And you're not necessarily going to attack or aggress them, but it's an awareness and ready to defend oneself against them.
Yeah. Well, the follow-up is Nassim Taleb saying, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't really know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend says villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson says, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, I did something morally and socially wrong? So it's basically, again, a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but it's kind of like, does punishment work? What do we do when we find an enemy and know they're accountable for something not good? What's the route? Punishment or what?
I mean, again, it's difficult to come up with a rule for that.
Yeah.
Whether punishment is good or punishment is not good. I mean, it really depends upon the nature of the crime, and it depends upon the nature of a person. I mean, what to some people may be criminal behavior, to other people may be behavior to emulate. And they may think that it's just great to do that, and people should be allowed to do certain things. So it's very tricky. Taking of a life is a different issue. we can agree that the willful, intentional taking of a life is bad, then what do? What does punishment, though, actually achieve?
You're asking the question. That's it.
I'm asking you the question.
Yeah, because it's like we know there's a prison industrial complex in America, but it is like
but is that effective? No, I don't think it's effective.
But if you had a vote right now, yes to capital punishment or no, how would you vote?
I would vote no.
Yeah. But then Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. You brought up the word rules or laws. Who's entitled to make the rules?
I believe that people as a democracy should be making up the rules.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. So James, we'll get back to all that again, Nora. You're really good. Okay. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Because we're all, it also allows us to watch how other people live lives.
Yeah.
There's this whole, it's a story. We like to see other people's stories.
Yeah.
Our life there's no way our own individual, we can act out every single scenario. So it's fun to watch other scenarios.
Yeah. One artist said, art is making your problems other people's problems. Any comment?
Oh, I like that. Who said that?
Usually I say his name first, and Mike Kelly.
Oh, Mike Kelly said that? Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah. That's a good one.
Here's a poet, Fanny Howe. The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't. That one I don't get so much. I'm wondering if you have
repeat that one. Life is, yeah.
The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't.
That's an interesting one. Maybe by showing that it isn't. Life is worth living by showing that it isn't worth living. It is a sort of tautology there.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just walk us through a little, Nora. You're raised by parents who are literature people. Where's the point where you go, oh, I want to be a writer and I want to be an educator? Where's your two tipping points? What'd you study in high school and college, and where'd you go, that's my calling?
So high school, I didn't know. I think I wanted to be a marine biologist in high school. I actually wanted to study language patterns in dolphins. Then I got to college, and my freshman semester was kind of catastrophic in the sciences. I'd gone to a very small high school. Suddenly I was in calculus, biology, chemistry. Each of those classes was 3 times as large as my entire graduating class, right? I had no idea, but also with curves, with things like that. I didn't even know I was failing some of these classes. And in order to get up my GPA, because I was also an athlete, so I had to maintain a certain GPA to compete, I decided I better start taking those literature courses because I knew I was pretty good at them.
Oh, wow.
So it was very instrumental.
What sport was it?
It was sailing.
Oh, sailing. Okay. So then you go
since you're in Venice, California, you can, there.
Yeah.
There are boats
right
there.
the
There's
marina,
boats.
But then you kind of, well, is it fallback? How would you describe it? The literature was like, well, I know I'm good at lit, so I get the good grades. And then where's that tipping point? Well, okay, this is my calling.
I don't think I ever viewed it as a calling. I thought it was kind of like going into the family business. Both my parents were professors.
I
So
got
there's
you.
never, I guess there was never any discussion or
Yeah.
question that I would go to graduate school. It's like people going to college or high school.
Yeah.
It's like just something that was expected that I would then do that.
Yeah. But I mean, then we'll get specifically, but where's a tipping point where you must have seen experimental film and go, oh, I'm going to write a book about Chris Marker and Haran, like that's like there, that's different than lit in a way, because
Okay.
I mean, essay is, one
Yeah.
I've delved deep into my, since I saw San Soleil, I went, what? And, back to Ziggo Berto. But I mean, where's your tipping point where you sort of go lit into my subject matter is essay?
Okay. So I was in comparative literature.
Yeah.
And when I did comparative literature, my focus was actually on political theater.
Oh.
So my dissertation was on the viability of theater as a live form with live bodies on the stage in an age of mass media.
Yeah.
So I chose as my case point the Vietnam War, since it was the first televised war, and there were a lot of plays and theater anti the Vietnam War. So I was heavily into theater, experimental theater, documentary theater, mainly European theater. And then the tipping point came. So my education, though, was in literature and theory. And then the tipping point was the job market, where all of a sudden there were very few jobs in theater, but there were starting to be jobs in film or film and theater. So I had to pivot and kind of train myself into being more a film person. And up to that point, I had seen films. I mean, I'd seen a lot of films, but I had never studied film formally. And it wasn't my passion. And then when I started, I remember seeing my first Chris Marker films and Haroon Farokhi films and Godard films. I was like, oh, this I can actually relate to. This isn't just the dream machine. There's something else going on here. They're posing problems. They're making me think. And in a way, it was the closest thing I could get to theory without it being a book.
That is amazing.
So that's how I got.
Yeah, Nora, this is great because I've interviewed Ben Russell and Bill Brown. These guys are like semiotic Harvard Yale dudes who go, I can't do this with words. I can do it with film. It was like so funny because it's really amazing. Because the other thing, where you came from, because the first film I ever showed proud of was Hearts and Minds, which is an amazing documentary. And I'm so proud of that. But I've studied like, what is the first human invention for years? So people, and then we could go for hours on that. It could be the gaze, John Berger. And then there's a female gaze and the male gaze or the human gaze, or it could be recognizing the other. My friend says you see yourself in your mom's eyes and she gives you milk, and so then you go, oh, I'm other. And so there could be the other. But my favorite is the people you must have studied is Augusto Paulo and Paulo Freire, the theater of the oppressed, who said the first human invention was theater. So that encompasses everything.
Right.
And I love that because, it's like I mean, it's also Kenneth Anger saying the day cinema was made was a black day for humankind.
Did he say that?
Yeah, I had a lecture for years that says it's based on Phyllis Diller. It's film can't kill you, but why take a chance? Because in the long run, I mean, we know how important cinema is, and we know how lame it is in the big picture. But thank God for Godard and Haran and Chris Marker.
Right.
And all those are all the males, all the females who
Yeah, I mean,
had left.
Yvonne Rainer. I mean, there's
Yeah,
so many, Martha
yeah,
Rosler.
the one that slipped by me who said, I'll be interviewed by you, and then Caroline Schliemann. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
right.
I blew it so bad by not doing the great follow-up and going, let's do this. But Lynn, I mean, she was interviewed a lot, but that was really good. So now I'm curious, because being a writer and being a teacher and educator, how does this apply? A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process as a writer and an educator?
So my own intentions. I mean, my
That's,
intentions are just to get students to think.
yeah.
So that's my intention with pedagogy. I mean, I hate giving grades. I hate tests. I hate all of the assessments that the institutions force us to perform. I mean, I want students that think and want to learn. I also don't want the student who's just sitting there because they have to get the degree, because the degree is some kind of entry into the real world, whatever the hell that means. So I respond best to a student who is actually trying to think, trying to figure things out, and helping to provide them with the tools to do that. And make them aware of different possibilities of seeing that they may have intuited, but didn't know if it was okay to think that way or what to do with it. And these are different strategies and methodologies that people over the years, century have used. So that's my role as a pedagogue. My role as a writer, it's just to provide knowledge, to put things out there for other people to learn from. So if someone was interested in Chris Marker, there were no books on Chris Marker at the time. I had to wrestle with that a lot because I had met him, and then he didn't want me to write the book because he didn't think that any book could contain his genius, as he put it.
He literally said that to you?
Yeah.
To contain my genius? Oh my God.
And he was already older at that point, but still. And then I didn't do anything for about 5 years. And then finally someone said to me, hey, listen, that's ridiculous. You just go ahead and write your book. And so I was very tentative in writing. And then I did send him a copy, and then someone who knew him quite well and would visit him regularly said he did have the book on his desk.
There you go. But
that was good.
Well, Lynn Sachs went and her whole story. She said, "Oh, let's get a picture together," and he's like, "No."
Yeah, that's right.
But Agnes Varda gave me his fax number because I was going to Paris, and it just didn't happen. But that's pretty amazing. So, but
I just called. So I had his number, and this was actually through a theater connection that he was friends with, Armand Gatti, whom I had written about and worked on. And so I had his phone number. And so I called, and, having been raised in America, I assumed I would get, a studio with an office. And he picks up the phone. I was just what do I say now?
Really great. Okay, so Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your book?
I think of my reader to the extent that in my style of writing, I try to write as clearly as possible. And so that I can reach what I would consider to be a reader who can, I remember once, I think it was Dominic LeCapra saying that he wrote for a person who could read like the New York Times or the New York Review of Books.
Right.
You know, a clear style. I can't stand it when people use a lot of jargon or try to alienate the readership. So, I mean, that would be the type of, I just want to write clearly. I want to get my ideas out there
Yeah,
for people.
I like that. Did you, just an aside, did your parents ever explore James Joyce, or have you ever explored James Joyce?
I mean, I've read Ulysses and I had Portrait of the Artist, and the Dubliners. I mean, I love Ulysses.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's great.
Have you ever read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people?
No,
It's
no.
the only way you can do it.
Okay.
Anyways, have you ever seen Mary Ellen Butte's film Passages from Finnegan's Wake?
No, is it good? Is it worth seeing?
Well, it's pretty amazing that Joyce invented the internet and disguised it as a book, but she is a woman who invented experimental abstract electronic animation and made one feature film, Finnegan's Wake. It's like, whoa. It's, you know, in a way, it's just an amazing thing that she accomplished, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it worth watching? I mean, you can watch it on YouTube free. I mean, yeah, I would say, but I mean, that's a whole nother world, because it's just, I love you. Like, to be clear, so you're reaching someone who reads the New York Times and New Yorker. Here's McLuhan saying, everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera or projector extends our eyelid. Maybe even non-tangibles, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness does the writing utensil extend for you?
So it extends my thoughts, which would be my brain.
Yeah, your brain. Yeah. McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or a bad movie. It's a good or a bad viewing experience. Any comment?
There are some really, really bad movies out there. I'm sorry. I mean,
don't be sorry.
It's not just you can have the best viewing experience, and if it's a horrible movie, it's a horrible movie.
Yeah. It's like going to Ann Arbor Film Festival for the half of the, 30 years. Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing. When Derek Jarman's Blue came out, I says, finally, I can see like the ultimate experimental film, 90 minutes of just blue. And I knew too much. And it was like, that, not very good, And I mean, it was good enough, but it didn't accomplish kind of what I wanted.
Right.
It to take it farther. Like Haran and Marker, the two guys that you have written about, who I'm so amazed by, they seem to do that. They do something that you just never. It's like Bruce Conner saying, I want to make a film that no one else has ever done before. And that's why experimental film goes to Peter Greenaway saying, because I mean, really, these people you've written about, it seems, are, I know it's your theater and political, but to me, those people are experimental filmmakers. If you have to put them in a genre, and Peter Greenaway,
writers.
They're also writers, exactly. But I mean, that goes back to Ernst Lubitsch and Preston Sturges and Billy Wilder. Those dudes made great films because they were writers.
Yeah.
And that's when Preston goes, well, I want to be the writer and the director, And I mean, it's not, again, to exclude the women, because when I learned about Alice Guy Blanchet, it was like, what the heck? How did I not know about her?
Yeah, I just saw her last week. It's pretty amazing.
That film came out. You've seen that film about her?
I haven't seen the film about her, but I've read about her and I've seen.
Oh, you got it. I mean, the film isn't like great, but it's like, why, especially when Einstein, Potemkin scene is so monumental in the history of cinema. And he saw it as an 8-year-old done by her and ripped her off. Did you know that? No,
I didn't know that.
I mean, and that doesn't mean he ripped her off. He was inspired by her. So, but she didn't get the credit for doing the scene that became the monumental like cliche shot that Woody Allen will make fun of someday. So, anyways, it goes to Peter Greenaway saying cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. So, you brought up the word story earlier. Are experimental filmmakers telling a story a different way or doing something completely different? Or in the question could be asked better. You know what I'm trying to get at, just your thoughts on that. Because if me and you see Tony Conrad's The Flicker, it's just black and white flickering off on and off for 15 minutes. We might have a story go through our heads, but it isn't storytelling per se.
Mm-hmm.
No. Even though, to contradict myself, because I am a hypocrite, is Andrew Norton said, if you put one frame next to another, that is narrative.
Right.
But yeah. I mean, your thoughts on that. That Greenaway is an interesting quote. Cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers.
I think that's true. I mean, I think that there are, like, when we think about mainstream cinema, television, serials, media, whatever, it's stories. And I think a lot of students come in and they want to make stories. And they think of stories in a very conventional, fictional way, or they think about stories about themselves, their own auto memory works, which I'm not a big fan of those.
What is auto memory works?
I don't know. I mean, it would be like, what is it called? Like that. It's a whole new genre in fiction. So you have people like Annie Ernaux and others who are auto fiction.
I gotta look. It's called auto meaning or auto fiction.
I think it's auto fiction.
What's the example you gave? Just the name.
Annie Ernaux, Ernaux, and she won a Nobel Prize. She's French. So you sort of, it's about your own memoirs and slightly fictionalized, but not that much.
Oh my God. Thank you for telling me that.
So it's a lot of like identity stuff. And anyway, but I think that you're right. I mean, I would say that there are theory films. Like I would say Bruce Conner's Flicker, it's a theory. He's working something out. I mean, it's a thought theory thinking film. He's trying to see, what can I do with this medium? What are the limits of the medium? How can I push it away from basically the anti-story film?
But again, you're teaching me a lot, Nora. I appreciate this. Theory film is an academic term, or you just made that up right now?
No, I didn't make it up. I mean, people like Laura Mulvey and Peter Wolin used to talk about their films as theory films. Some people call them essay films.
Right. So you're saying Peter Wolin and Lauren, you're saying they use the term theory film.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know who first said essay film?
I mean, I argue that it was Hans Richter, who writes in 1936 or 34 the essay film.
Really?
The film is essay, yeah.
Oh my God, that's good to know. Thank you. Because I if you look it up on Wikipedia, it says Ziga Vertov was the first essay film. But I mean,
Ziga Vertov, Man with the Movie Camera does he call it an essay? I don't think he calls it. I don't think he's calling it an essay. Oh, yeah.
Someone who wrote that entry said that was the first essay. To me, when I saw Sans Soleil, it was all over with. I was like, okay, that's it. And right. I consider that the best. I mean, isn't that the best essay film ever? Yeah, that's what I really want. I want you to tell me what's the best essay film.
I can't tell you the best essay film because there's so many different ones. But yeah. Going back to like Vertov's, I write that Vertov's Man with the Movie Camera is certainly an essay film, but yeah. I actually even go further back. So a lot of people write on the essay film. They think you cannot have the essay film before the advent of sound. I disagree with that, and I actually go back almost to D.W. Griffith's A Corner in Wheat.
Wow. What year?
I think it's 1909.
1909.
And he's
no,
trying to
no
show
sound.
no sound, and he's really trying to show what does it mean to corner a market. So it's like cornering the wheat market. So how can you have basically an abundance produce wheat, but then the person who's producing it can't afford it because people are buying it up. So he's trying to do an essay on the beginnings of global capitalism, right? And this whole idea of the global markets and being able to create scarcity as well as glut, et cetera, et cetera.
Man, you open up a floodgate there. I got to tell you one thing first. And I asked, I think Tom Gunning is one of the foremost knowledgeable people on D.W. Griffith. He didn't know this, but I read this in a book that D.W. Griffith said in 2024, cinema will end warfare.
Really?
Yes. And I mean, it's just
that. Well, that hasn't come to.
but it is like, no, it's almost like increased. But my opinion is cinema has caused warfare for 100. It's only 130 years old. Cinema's not very old, and it's really propagated warfare and probably has done more harm than good in the long run. But that's the other thing I wanted to shoot in really quick was writing about Chris Marker was Jay Rosenblatt told me, I said, it's evident he's influenced by Chris Marker and Sans Soleil. And I says, what did you get from him? And he goes, I imagined how he made Sans Soleil. It wasn't like I've read every book on how Chris Marker made his films, and I've read every interview and figured out how he did it. It was what he was influenced by, how I imagined he made it, which to me is what art should do. You shouldn't you shouldn't be just like, oh, I can clone this person or do that. I mean, that's T.S. Eliot saying the mature poet steals and the immature poet imitates. And I told that to Lynn Sachs once, and she goes, well, I must be an immature poet because I imitate, And I was like, no, Lynn, you're a great poet, but it's like Frank Zappa saying a genius is someone who steals and you don't know who they stole it from. Now, most of us, we can figure out, like I would be curious because the other essay film I'd love to hear you talk about just briefly is F is for Fake, because that to me is like a normal person. Normal people don't know who Chris Marker is, could care less, but at least they kind of know who Orson Welles is.
Right.
And do you consider F is for Fake a good example of an essay film?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you taught me well there. Now, this is like in the experimental film world. What are the services and disservices of ghettoizing it or marginalizing it? Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in 1949. Normal people in America could form an aesthetic on experimental painting. There were no Maya Deren or Bruce Conner Life magazine covers. So generally it's privileged, I call them rich art kids, entitled kids who develop an aesthetic, avant-garde aesthetic, and dominate the experimental film world. Any comment?
I think what you're saying is correct. You're raising, it's who you know a lot of the time. It's the reception. It's also, I think it's what you're supposed to do, depending who you are. So for example, I kind of wrote about this in the essay film book. But in the mid-'80s in Britain, there were several Black British collectives. One was Sankofa, where the titular head at that point was Isaac Julian, who's well known. And then there was Black Audio Film Collective, now John Akumfra, went when they dissolved, it was Smoking Dogs Films, and they both made films in like that were released in 1985, and one was Handsworth Songs about the riots in Britain that were the race, they called them race-based riots. And which film did Isaac make? I can't remember if it was Territories or.
But you're saying they're basically not rich art kids.
Right. So they were, you know, these Black British from the diaspora making very experimental work because they had both gone to art school.
Yeah.
And the reception was scathing.
Yeah.
So even someone like Salman Rushdie accused them of being irresponsible by making this experimental work on these serious political topics that they should have been doing straight documentaries. Yeah. And it was almost like they didn't have the right, because they were Black, British, diasporic, to make experimental work.
Yeah.
Which is really crazy. And then someone like Stuart Hall comes in and defends them and says, no, you can have a Black aesthetic, experimental avant-garde. I mean, this is not, the avant-garde isn't just the privilege of the white, you know, well-toned artist.
It's like the whole, that question kind of turns off all the experimental filmmakers that I interview, but I'm not just interviewing experimental filmmakers. I interview artists and I interview all different walks of life. But when I talk specifically with film people, they kind of go, well, that's true, but you know, there's nothing you can do about it, because that's basically what art has been since the beginning of commodification of art. It's the churches and rich people who finance it, you know. So, you know, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was to flip it? You know, what's their motive? Your hunch or your guess?
It was probably some sort of ritualistic and entertainment, and connected to hunts and ritual practices. I think a lot has been discovered now that if you take torches and lights and you move them across the images, it animates them in certain ways. So there's something going on there.
Yeah. But this is McLuhan in 57, because you brought up the word, you said the word.
You're a big McLuhanite.
Well, I just think that he's basically, you know, teasing people to believe his percepts or concepts. So he perceives things and he asks questions, but he's in the realm of in education. So they call him a theorist, and he's not. So most education chalk him off as a charlatan, and you know, rightfully so. He's not. You know, it says in Wikipedia, media theorist. He's not. He says, I'm not a theorist, but he probably would say, oh, leave that, because I'm an academic, you know. So he snuck in, you know, and so this is what he said. But you said the word entertain, because you're an educator too. He said 57, he said this. It's misleading to suppose there's any difference between education and entertainment. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic poetry and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So I'm curious your thoughts about that. Whatever pleases teaches more effectively in the realm of education and entertainment. You know, is there a difference between the two?
I think there certainly is a difference between entertainment and teaching or seriousness. I think that, yes, if something is pleasing, I mean, that's the old sugar-coated medicine, which I can't remember what British sort of 19th century person wrote about. But, you know, I mean, just to take two examples of what I consider to be, in a way, that two examples of projects that have a similar conceit to them. And I think one of them may not be teaching as much, and the other one is attempting to work on multiple levels. So this would be Godard's History of Cinema project
Oh,
from
yeah.
89-90, right? You know, which
Yeah.
is just like this amazing tour de force of
Yeah.
film, history, theory of cinema.
Yeah.
Is it
It teaches
pleasurable?
it.
It's not
Yeah.
exactly pleasurable to
Pleasurable.
watch.
Yeah.
You know, it's very difficult in some places. You're very aware that it's 4 or 6
Yeah.
hours long.
Yeah.
And then the counter to that, I would say, is a piece that people love, which is really, you know, they really, really enjoy it, is Christian Marclay's The Clock.
I was that is
You know, people can just sit there blissfully for 8 hours, 9 hours, aware the whole time because you see your
I know
time is going.
but
But they're just like, wow, this is so great. I can't believe I just spent 8 hours in it. And it's like, okay, why is that great? And
yeah.
Godard, you know, the Godard frustrates, it forces you to think.
Yeah,
It's
because
not
you know, perfect, Nora, you are so cool because Christian's a rich kid from Switzerland who's the greatest living Duchampian, and that's all. There's nothing post Duchamp, in my opinion, and he just knows like the artists of the future will only have to point. Well, he's very discerning, and if you read that New Yorker article, he went nuts making The Clock, but they just had him on CBS last week, and he's showing it in New York again.
right. It's that MoMA again. Yeah.
$1 million to buy a DCP, but I mean, he's a great artist. I am not dissing him. I love
No. I mean, he's done some amazing
work.
yeah.
No.
I don't know if you ever saw Guitar Drag.
Oh, I love that. I love all
that was really good.
Yeah. But the funniest is Godard's History of Cinema was compared directly to Finnegan's Wake. It is like, oh, that's some great critics said that's Finnegan's Wake. The Clock's review by Zadie Smith in whatever London Review of Books or New York is, I always go, if you want to know what Finnegan's Wake is, read her review of The Clock. That's Finnegan's Wake. It's the same difference. Okay. So it's very interesting that you brought up both those because, that's like Tom Anderson and Cal Arts saying, David Lynch says if you're watching a shitty film, you can at least study the lamps. And, like, I don't care about them, like you can learn from shitty films. Why is this film made? Why did humans make this? And is that entertaining and now the whole sense of watching films is totally changed. I mean, my wife and I, we study Woody Allen or we just study Billy Wilder. We put the subtitles on and we only watch a third and we stop it. And then, people don't go to movies anymore and feel obliged to sit for 2 hours or 6 hours or anything, So it's just changed how we consume this art form that was a certain way for 130 years, and so you really teach me a lot. What's more important? I thank you. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Depends on the stakes.
Yeah, how are you spelling steaks?
Right.
Depends on the stakes. That's
yeah.
Okay, so you've accomplished a lot. How do you rate these 3 elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck, skill, and ambition.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it they say that luck is, or opportunity is when luck approaches you and you know what to do with it. I mean, I think you need a lucky break, but you have to be able to identify that that's happening, and you need to be able to respond or react or have the skill, I guess, to use your word, skill to react. Ambition, I guess. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a little leery of ambitious people.
Okay, you're doing. See, I want to get deeper with people, and this is good. The woman I got a lot of my questions from, or was influenced, you might know her, Christine McKenna. She interviewed Beefheart, David Lynch, everybody over there, the Coen brothers. She's interviewed a lot, and in a lot of these questions are hers. And her question was, is ambition based more on fear or joy? And most people go fear. And so then I read Friedkin's book, or Friedkin said, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So you're breaking down luck. The other luck line I like is Gary Player, the golfer, said, the more you practice, the luckier you get.
That's good. That's true.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's being able to identify that luck
Yeah.
coming your way and to
Yeah.
know what to do with it.
yeah, you're a discerning thinker. You can see the big picture, and then you can figure out, well, this is the route I want to go.
Mhm.
You know, seeing the big picture is that's the main McLuhan thing, is he said suspended judgment. You can go in your lonely teenage room and go, I hate Facebook or I love it. But when you're with one or more people, you try to suss out, how is this shaping our behavior? What's the
Right.
So he said, understanding is not having a point of view. But
Okay.
people think if you understand something, oh, I'm for TikTok or I'm against it. Yeah, it's like, dude, what's
Mhm.
there's no use. So T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I mean, English usually.
It's more like, what form is your inner consciousness? Good, you're laughing.
I thought I could get out of that really
Yeah,
quickly.
okay, I'll tell you. Nora, I'll tell you already, because this is my favorite. You know her probably, Abigail Childs. You know her?
Yeah.
She's great. I says, what language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew.
That's good. I like that.
That is good. Okay, this is George Manupelli. Started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 some years ago.
Wow.
His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
I think I wouldn't say self-expression. I think a lot of the artists that I'm interested in, it's not about their individual subject position. Sometimes it is, but it's usually about larger societal, environmental problems, and that they then use the technology as a means to, like as a medium, as a means to transmit.
Yeah. Can art making be egoless?
Can art making be egoless? There is an issue. I think some artists would like to think that it can be egoless. There's certain brands of like conceptual artists, or since you're based on the West Coast, and did you mention Michael Asher at all?
No, I don't even know him. How do you spell Asher?
Michael Asher. He was this great conceptual artist who worked at Cal Arts for many years, and he seemed to be pretty egoless. So he often refused to make works.
That's good. I refuse. It's
like he would do just really interesting sort of projects that would challenge the whole system of value.
Yeah. No, those are the people I really love that exist, because there's a few of them, and that was a good the whole egoless. See, one woman, most people go, no, it can't be egoless. And then this woman about a year ago says, great art is egoless. And I went, wow. And then this other woman said, great art has to be egoless. So it's sort of like how and then you go into the word ego and how much it carries baggage with Freud. So people kind of, it's like, oh, you abandon your ego completely. So tell me one major element of your kind of Nora-ness, your writing and teaching that's changed and one that stayed the same in the years you've been doing it.
In my writing and teaching, one that has changed and one that has stayed the same.
Yeah.
I think that what has changed is that I've had to modify, or that I've changed some of my teaching styles. And much more aware of different modes of learning and how to sort of empower the students, as cliched as that sounds, to think. That I'm more patient, perhaps more flexible, more generous, and just trying to keep them going, to have them not tune out. Maybe that's a product of age, because I realize that the age gap grows every year. One more year goes by and they're younger and I'm older. And so just realizing that they are learning in different ways, and it's very different ways than I used to learn and that I would think that they learn. And I think that's the wonderful thing about teaching film, as opposed to some of my colleagues who teach literature, is that, you know, they've all seen films, they know films, right? There's something, if you say genre, they can link up. I mean, they can connect to that, whether it's the horror genre, whatever, comedy, Western. I mean, and once they're talking, then they feel intelligent and they're starting to think and put things together. But if you're teaching literature and you say, hey, tell me what 19th century novels you've read recently, to your average 18-year-old, most of them are going to look at you like, what? And then they shut down because they don't feel intelligent, right?
That goes back to that McLuhan thing. You know, whatever pleases teaches more effectively. What you're telling me is if they feel intelligent, that is pleasing. You're putting it, that is beautifully put. I love that, feel intelligent. So that was really good, Norm. What stayed the same in the years?
I think just I love reading.
Yeah.
And part of my ritual is in the morning, I will read nonfiction.
Yeah.
You know, I try to do at least, before I do anything else, before I go onto the news or check email or anything like that, I try to have at least 1 hour of pure focused reading without distraction.
Wow.
Of nonfiction reading. And then at night, before going to sleep, I have to read my novels. I have to read my fiction. Otherwise, and if I don't do this, have those two anchors, then I get really cranky.
Do you read New York Times?
I do, but that I read online. I mean, this is
you read New Yorker magazine?
I do, and that I read hard.
Those are two. Yeah,
I like to read hard copies.
What's your third source of things that you go to the world? New York Times, New York, or what would be your third or fourth?
So in terms of online news media, I go to the Guardian.
Yeah.
Then for journals, a little frustrated because now they're only coming out once a month and they used to come out once a week. So trying to adjust. I'm not quite pleased with this. Is The Nation. I mean, I've been a long time Nation subscriber and reader.
Well, check this out. Did you see the documentary on The Nation?
No.
It's okay. I mean, it's good, but here's the thing people don't realize. One of McLuhan's greatest articles ever is really short. and it's called Notes on Burroughs, and it's McLuhan writing about William Burroughs.
Wow.
Just Google Notes on Burroughs.
Yeah.
And they didn't even flash it in for 1 second. I mean, even National Lampoon Magazine's documentary, which is way better, flashed in McLuhan, and he never wrote for the. So, anyways, a few more and we're out of here. This has really been fun. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
My own weakness?
Yeah,
if personal weakness.
Yeah, like, it's, I mean, weakness is a heavy word. It's sort of like, how'd you turn a rejection into a redirection, or a problem into a solution, or, it's just, weakness sounds, it's basically a weakness into a strength,
Well, I told you about my weakness in science. So one could say that I turned that into my going into literature and stuff. So that would be turning it into a strength because of a weakness in math. But I don't think that's what you're driving at.
Well, no, that can apply. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's fine. If you want to go with that one, that's fine.
I mean, I would say, weakness would have been that I had never formally studied film. And so I had to really learn about it. And then, or here's a weakness. Okay. One of the areas which we haven't touched on that I do that I'm very interested in is sound.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm probably the most unmusical person in the world. Like I'm completely tone deaf, but because of that, I'm very attuned to sound and to the sonic world of artworks. So it's kind of gets back to that Godard, to see elsewhere, to hear elsewhere. And so trying to look at what is just below the surface, or what is in that audible world.
Yeah. When you brought up marine biologists at the beginning, I was going to shoot this in, but now it's appropriate. This guy I interviewed is a jazz pianist, and he did the sound for Koyaanisqatsi. Amazing human being. And he basically is an activist to help sea creatures not be hurt by noise pollution.
Oh, really? Like propellers and the wind turbines and things.
There's all kinds of noise pollution. And the other guy is Paul Watson, who he's a big McLuhan guy, and he's just being beat up every week by the Japanese government. He formed Greenpeace.
Right.
And he's like, dude, I just made a movie to expose what you're doing. And they physically hurt him, and it's not good because he's an older man. And it's like, come on, he's a legitimate activist just saying here, it's all this kind of thing called, it's almost like citizen journalism. It's like, hey, Have
you seen the documentary on Eugene Smith?
No, who's Eugene Smith?
He was a really important photographer, sort of journalist photographer. I think he did some of the photos maybe in the 40s, the opening of the camps. And then he had some of the first, he was a photographer for Life magazine. So one of their best photographers. And then he had done some in Japan after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah. And then he was basically convinced to go back to Japan to do investigative photography on the mercury poisoning at Makimari. And so he made a photograph of it was one of the last covers of Time magazine. And it's this sort of woman, this Pieta figure of this woman who's bathing her seriously handicapped, deformed daughter. It's in black and white. But when he was in Japan, in this small area, I mean, he was beaten to a pulp. He was hospitalized. All his negatives were, I mean, just the violence he incurred. And
Yeah.
this was 72. He died 6 years later as a result of the injuries. So, really putting yourself on the line.
I'll definitely seek it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just called, I think it's called like, it's the name of the place that had the mercury poisoning, but it's a new documentary on Eugene Smith.
I will look for it. I mean, that's the amazing thing about essay films, is that they're important, but the slew of documentaries that we have gotten over the last 2-3 decades is pretty amazing. When you like, I Am Not Your Negro, that guy is like
Raoul Peck. Amazing.
Raoul Peck is just like him and Johann. I was like, you guys should be, dominating the world. And I mean, Raoul is like amazing. I mean,
Have you seen his early film from 2000? It's called A Prophet and Nothing But.
I'm not
It's
sure.
about Haiti. Oh, and that's at 2000.
Yeah, I've got to see
it's
that.
really, really good.
Yeah, I've
But
seen.
I was listening to NPR, and I think it was like Terry Gross was interviewing Raoul Peck, and he was explaining how he had studied, he got a degree in economics at the Humboldt University in Berlin when it was still part of East Berlin.
Yeah.
And then he was in West Berlin in the 80s as a filmmaker. And I'm like, okay, not a big scene in West Berlin in the 80s. And so I wrote to him, I had his address, and I just said, heard this interview just out of curiosity. Did you ever meet or run into Harim Farouki? And he's like, yes, I took courses with him.
Oh my God, Raoul.
That was like just a wonderful kind of loop circling around.
That's amazing. And then the other, you must know the woman who remade Haran's film,
Jill Godmillo.
She has 2 or 3 times said, yes, I'll do an interview. And then she, won't book it, because that, to me, I mean, what's your take on her remake?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's really good. She also did a very important film in the late 80s called Far From Poland.
Yeah.
Which was, again, it's kind of a remake of Far From Vietnam, because the visas for the film crew were yanked at the last minute by the Polish government. And she wanted to film the whole union strikes, Lech Walesa, what was happening then. And so then it's like, okay, how do I make this film on this topic when I can't go there?
Yeah.
But you should try her again. She just published a book last year.
I will try her again, because it's been the 3 strikes and you're out. I understand people, but I asked for 90 minutes and we're past 90.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, I would love to do a part 2, but we could go a little longer now, or schedule a part 2, whatever you like. I mean,
yeah, I probably have to go because I have to.
Let's go, and it could be 3, 4, 5 months down the line, and maybe even do a salon someday, like with you and Lynn Sachs and a couple of. And I would like to do you, Lynn Sachs, and Nina Menkins.
Okay.
So when you have 4 people, but do you have 5 minutes to close out, or okay? Let's do these in closing. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
What is a question that remains unresolved for me, in terms of film or in general?
In general, or film, but you put it in the context you want. Yeah.
I think, is it possible to make something that really will reach a lot of people and change their lives?
Yeah.
Is that possible anymore, or have we become just too fragmented?
Yeah.
Is there any kind of common, everybody has their own now feeds that they read or films that they see. I mean, everything's become so fragmented that is it even possible to make something that will that a lot of different constituencies will actually receive.
It's really good, Nora, because I quote that when I do that lecture. It's called "Film Can't Hurt You, but Why Take a Chance?" The first quote is Sidney Lumet. He says, "Film can't do diddly squat, but it ain't going to keep me from trying."
Right.
So, he made socially aware films his whole career. And we, it is how much can a film really, Avatar is the other one. I'd say it was the biggest film event in the history of the world. And it was pro Mother Nature and anti the man. And people come out and go, wow, the special effects were great. And it's slow, you don't know that how much, like me watching Wizard of Oz as a kid on TV has affected me in the long run. You can't process it, and say, were you affected by this in your life? Because it's a zeitgeist. Does like the thing about Last Tango, does violent films alleviate the human of violent tendencies, or does it cause them to go do it?
Right.
You can't, there's no way we can really survey and find out exactly.
Along those lines, I remember I used one of my favorite films at one point used to be the Battle of Algiers.
Oh my God.
And then I remember when I learned that it was being used, I think it was during the first Gulf War for training purposes. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like.
Well, that was the proof that it was, this, Nora, that's a fake documentary. It is not a fiction film. It's a fake doc. But it's, you don't want to call it a fake doc. But I've interviewed John Ellis, who made the same film, the Oppenheimer film. And his film was the same thing. They used it, the good guys and the bad guys.
Yeah.
That, to me, is proof he made the kind of perfect doc. The Crumb film is the same way. Is this guy's a sicko or is he great art? And then they have, Robert Hughes saying, well, that's again, I'd love to get into that, especially like Jill's big essay on Joshua Oppenheimer. Oh my God.
Oh, right. The act of killing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. So how has, three more and we're out of here, just quickie. How has writing about and teaching film shaped your behavior?
I think it's shaped my behavior, and that one's very much aware that everything, it's a performance, and also sort of to have more of a cinematic eye when you look at things out there.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I am that's Veritop. I am the camera.
Right.
Billy Wilder said, art is confession. Art is, no, not Billy. Sorry. That was a blooper. Thornton Wilder, the guy who wrote Our Town in 1928. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
What's it really all about for me?
Yeah.
In teaching, I guess it would be just to make people more thoughtful filmmakers and to think about things. I think it's really, I'm moving back more and more into classroom discussions, moving further and further from online. The importance of discussion is very important for me right now for conversation. Yeah. I think that there are people, especially after the pandemic, young people are not used to talking that much or listening to each other. And I think that's very important, is to listen without passing judgment. I had to teach Wednesday after the election. and a large class of 180 students. And many of them, not all of them, were pretty devastated. And I said, okay, you're an incoming freshman class. You guys are going to be working together. You're filmmaking teams. I mean, this is mandatory class. I said, this is your cohort. These are your colleagues. You're going to work together for the next 4 years. I think it's important to listen to why, for some people, it's a good day. And for other people, it's kind of the worst day in their adulthood. It's the first time they voted. And it was interesting because, people started to state their positions. Nobody stated why they were happy, but everybody else was different perspectives. And then afterwards, I was told that one student felt that course, he loves my class. I don't know if it's he. They love my class. They love me as a professor, but it made them feel uncomfortable. And I was like, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's fine to feel uncomfortable. You learn when you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's really two things you taught me that were so important. Listen. So you're like conversation, discussion, but it's also listening. Hard thing to really teach. Where do you think you got that from? Listening and being comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. More from the way your parents raised you or more on your own?
I don't know. That's hard to say. If it's just part of I myself have often felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's how they raised me or if it's just,
What gives you the most optimism?
I think my students give me the most optimism.
Yeah.
And this is again about providing them with whatever knowledge I can have just to help them with the tools and provide them with these toolkits of how to make work and how to, do things, how to, become productive, good citizens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing because the first question I asked is what's the best thing for a human being? And I love that you said integrity. And when they asked Wilhelm Reich, what's the best thing for a human being? He said, another human being. In the last question, what gives you the most optimism? That's what I get the most is youth, students, younger people. They asked Groucho Marx that question at the end of his life, what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another
great.
person.
Thank you. Yeah,
Especially because it was you, Nora. Thank you so much. I was really enlightened.
Thank you, Jerry. That was great.
Yeah, really inspired. And I would love to do a part 2 somewhere down the line, but I really think we could do a really cool salon on something. I don't know. It could be, I'd love to do a salon just on Chris Marker, but it could be the female gaze and Nina Menkins. I haven't interviewed her since the movie came out. I interviewed her way before the movie. And that's a heavy one too, but it could incorporate many things, but we'll see. Like you could help me pick. Ideally, it's like 6 people is sort of ideal.
Yeah.
And the thing about Zoom that's amazing and listening and I did all these events live with people in a room. And then COVID hit and I changed and did all my interviews. And now, you don't have to drive or I don't have to drive. And, I find that people are more present in a Zoom than they are in a room.
Oh, that's interesting.
People don't like to hear that, but the history is amazing. In 1939 is when Americans first saw Zoom. It was at the New York World's Fair. It's called television telephone. And it was the same year Finnegan's Wake came out in 1939. But it became a reality in 1968 in 2001, where the guy in the space ships calls his daughter to wish her a happy birthday. And then it became this reality to everybody during COVID. And that's, everybody, so I appreciate that we have this medium because I would have had to wait until you came to LA or I got there And so thank you so much. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever, Nora. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye-bye.